Hello from my garden on a very autumnal day. There's lots of beautiful leaves from my Acer, beautiful red colour, which is quite appropriate. And it's fairly windy, which is why I've got a nice fluffy jumper on. And I wanted to talk very briefly as an introduction to the idea of menstrual cycle awareness, mainly for people who are thinking of coming to my red tent gathering that I host in my house, because there's certain language, certain analogies that we tend to use that it's helpful to have some idea of beforehand. And it's really based on two ladies' work, Alexandra and Sjanie Hugo Wurlitzer. And Alexandra's published a number of books over the years which are all really useful. So we have the pill that she co-authored with Jane Bennett, who also does all the celebration days for girls. Then came the Women's Quest workbook that we're working through in the Red Tent group at the moment as a sort of starting point for talking. Then came the Wild Genie, and I would recommend all of those, but really the pièce de résistance is Wild Power. It just takes it to a whole new level. It really brings in the sort of how this menstruality, this inner teacher, which is your cycle, can be a spiritual teacher. So it's really deep stuff. And so I'm just going to very briefly explain a few things so that you can get going, but I thoroughly recommend that you get hold of this. And if you're local to me, at the time of doing the video, I have some spare copies for sale because I think it's so wonderful. So, we're in autumn, but it's best to start with thinking of the inner seasons with the inner winter, because day one of the cycle starts when your bleed starts, and that's the main flow rather than any spotting beforehand. And your inner winter can last between 1 and 7 days. So I'm going to do this on the basis of a standard sort of 28 cycle, but we all need to remember that cycles can vary. They can be shorter, they can be longer, and it's really about feeling into the seasons for you as an individual woman. So inner winter is when the period is happening, and then it may tail off and you'll have a few more days in that phase of winter before you then go into your inner spring. So inner spring, based on the 28-day cycle, would be about day 8 to day 13, and that's your pre-ovulatory phase. So as a lot of people will associate the outer spring of the year with energy rising up, new life and so on, some women in their inner spring also have that feeling of emerging out of their cave and their feeling of wanting to rest and withdraw, to feeling like they're ready to re-enter the world. And it might be a real time of ideas. Certainly for me, I sort of have all sorts of ideas popping, and I just have to restrain myself and think, well, not yet, don't act on them, just see what happens. And then your inner summer is roughly day 14 through to 21. No, sorry, day 20, depends on the person. And your inner summer might be the highest time of energy. Sometimes the analogy of superwoman is used. You feel like you could take on everything, can take on the world. You may feel, you may have more sexual dreams, you might feel more sensuous, you might be more willing to put yourself out there and all your creative endeavours in the world. Then into inner autumn, so the pre-menstruum, where you may experience PMT, is about day 22 through to day 28. And so with this, you might feel like you're wanting to withdraw. For some women, that might be feeling like you just want to separate from the hubbub of life at home, whether it's flatmates or family. You just need a bit more space to yourself. Otherwise, you can feel very irritated or upset more easily. You might feel your energy beginning to decrease a little bit. The one thing I really love in the Wild Power book is how they say what we're giving you is an archetype for the cycle, but actually the big red rule is that your experience trumps everything else. So when I've been in circle work, some people have said, I really don't like summer, I just feel like I want to withdraw. So not fitting that archetypal getting out there in the world. So it's really important that if your experience is different, not to feel that it's wrong. That's really, really important. The other important thing to know about is the crossover days. So that's, for example, when you're transitioning from your inner winter into the inner spring. And at first it might be quite hard to notice these crossovers. It might be very subtle. And it might be enough when you're first tracking your cycles just to concentrate on the major phases and the major things that you're feeling in each cycle. But often the challenges, when it feels more difficult in the cycle, and there might be more extremes of emotion, are these crossover days, because there's a shift. I think even subconsciously you can feel that something's happening, even if you're not quite sure where it's coming from. So for example, my day 21 is my crossover usually from summer into my inner autumn, and I've often been sort of going full power, superwoman styly. Yay, I can do everything, it's all going well, yay, give me more, and then boom, and it's like, if I haven't prepared in the rest of the cycle, it's like dropping off a cliff. I just go boom, what have I done? Why have I taken all this stuff on? Now that I'm aware of it and working not to take on so much and pace myself better, I don't get such a drop. And also because I'm aware of it, it's not such a shock maybe. I can anticipate it. And I've realised that it should be like a mini one day in a winter. So in the same way that I would rest as much as I can through my inner winter with working and small children and all the rest of it, I still need to do the same thing on my crossover day between summer and autumn. So it might be, it's unlikely that it would be a whole day that I get to rest, but if I can do some token of resting, so it might be a relaxation, I lie down for 10 minutes, that will really help. Also, what I've noticed in that crossover is trying to have a little bit of buffer from the outside world. So maybe not watch the news that day, be careful about who I spend time with or give energy to, because I'm much more likely to be rocked emotionally on that day by what people say. So I've been working with that one, and because of what I'm doing in the rest of the cycle, that has become a lot easier. And so now I guess I'm working more on noticing the shift from my inner winter to my inner spring. That's a really subtle one that I still find hard to pinpoint sometimes. So the more you track your cycle, the more you get intrigued by different aspects of it. I think that's probably enough to be starting with. The question is, how do I track my cycle? And there are lots of different ways. I prefer using Alexandra's menstrual dreaming chart. So it's a sort of circular one with segments to write in each day. You can either contact Red School or get in touch with me if you want me to explain more about how that works. But I focus more on writing emotions in, and around the outside I write dreams. Some people I know who use it colour it in, so at a glance they can see what kind of mood they were in. Other people just keep it more like a diary or a journal, linear. A way that I want to try soon is having all, so like all my day 21s on one page. So maybe perhaps you can fit in 6 months worth of day 21s, and then it's very easy to compare. Oh yeah, there are the same things happening there. And then on the next page you'll see space for 6 months worth of day 22s. So you might just have a box for each one that you can write a few bits in. That'd be a really good way to compare. There are apps. So there's the Clue app that seems really popular with people I know who are using menstrual cycle apps. There are lots of sort of moon diaries. It's endless really, but it's finding a way that you will actually keep track. And it doesn't matter if you forget a few days, because that often happens in my summer. I get so sort of busy with doing stuff. I'm like, oh dear, get to day 21, I think I've missed a few days. So don't worry, just go back to it as soon as you realise. As I said right at the beginning, day 1 is the start of your bleed, when you feel like it's properly going. So some women have a sort of long lead up to it with a lot of spotting, but it's when you really feel it gets going. And then you just follow it around until the next time you start a bleed, and then you might start a new chart or a new page, or however it's working on what you're doing. And it might be at first you just put 2 words for each day to sum it up, so it doesn't have to take long. And then as it goes along you might find that you're wanting to write more and understand the subtleties a little bit more. But definitely recommend this. There's lots more that they go into in there, including different sort of parts of that inner winter. I just read it in one go basically. I couldn't put it down, and I need to go back through it now a bit more slowly. But it's the kind of thing that you can just keep going back to. It's very accessible, quite poetic in places. It's really a lovely read. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight to this analogy of using seasons for different phases of the menstrual cycle. If you're not cycling anymore in that way, you can also use the lunar cycle, so you can very easily look up on the internet when the new moon is. So the new moon would be your day 1, the full moon would be your equivalent of ovulation, and in the same way then you can chart how your energy is changing through that cycle. So it can work whether you're cycling or not, because of menopause or hormonal contraception, whatever it might be. So the main thing I want to say to you is have a go at tracking. Even if you're on hormonal contraception and you think, oh well, does this really apply to me? Some women do still feel like there is some cycle there. They might feel like it's subdued, but have a go anyway, I would say. And I'm just going to sort of do a summary at the end with some visuals, so you can see how the different phases map on all these different layers, because I certainly am a visual learner, so just to recap in that way. So thank you for joining me, and let me know if this has been helpful, and I hope to see you at a red tent, or I hope that you go to your own local red tent very soon. Bye. So let's zoom in on the inner winter. I hope you can see it. So in the orange it says the inner winter, so that's about day 1 to day 7 of your cycle, and it's when you've got your period, at least initially, depending on how long your flow is. And if you're not cycling, if you don't have a menstrual cycle for whatever reason, you would connect your day 1 with the new moon. Some people might say, well, actually I find that my period comes on the full moon or some other time, but I'm sort of giving you an archetype here. And then the final layer is that this is the sort of phase in your life stage of the wise woman, or the crone, although the crone is not seen as a particularly positive word anymore, but we need to reclaim it. So we'll come back round to that later so you can see how it all fits together. So inner winter is when you've got your period. So let's move around to the inner spring and try and get everything in. So inner spring, about day 18 to 13, 8 to 13, depending on kind of how long your cycle is and so on. And this is the pre-ovulation phase. And so if you're thinking about the lunar cycle, it's when the moon is waxing, getting brighter in the sky. And the life stage that this phase connects with is the maiden. So when you're younger, so you might think of the qualities that you associate with the maiden, maybe innocence, a playfulness. And so even if we're beyond the maiden stage in our own lives now, when we're in the inner spring, you can think, or the waxing moon, you can have this idea of celebrating innocence, celebrating playfulness. So if you are getting new ideas, don't immediately judge them, say, oh, that's not realistic, that could never happen. It's an idea, just for time for ideas to come up, however far-fetched they may seem, to celebrate that creativity bubbling up. Okay, so let's move around to the next phase, and where these dark lines are on this circle I created, they're the crossover days, which you can read about more in Wild Power. So we're now in inner summer, so that's roughly days 14 through to day 20, and this is the ovulatory phase. So you have ovulation, and it tends to be a time of higher energy for most people, and this would connect with the lunar cycle with the full moon. So traditionally the full moon, people would travel more at night, they'd be feeling more sociable. You probably all heard of full moon parties in a place like Thailand. And the life stage connects with the mother. It might not be mother of children, but it might be that you're mothering creative projects or your career or whatever it might be, or have that sort of quality about you that you are doing a lot of caring for other people. Okay, and then let's move around to the inner autumn. So this is roughly days 21 through to 28. Again, we're just working on the basis of a sort of generic 28-day cycle, but mine before children always used to be about, I don't know, 30 days was quite regular. Now it's become a bit shorter, but every 4 or 5 cycles I have a 36-day cycle. So there's a pattern that has emerged through me tracking my cycle. So this is the part that connects with your premenstruum, which gets a very bad rap in our culture with PMT, PMS, and it might be this is kind of your crunch point if you haven't had much time to look after yourself beforehand and have downtime, or I don't know, you're not dealing with things. This is probably where it will bite your bum. In the lunar cycle, this is connecting with the waning moon, so it's beginning to get darker again. And in terms of the life stage, this is the wild woman, or the sometimes she's known as the enchantress, and a place of power really, but much I don't know, denigrated maybe in our culture. It's a time when perhaps women are worried about losing their attractiveness, and perhaps children are leaving home and women are not quite sure of their role. So it can be a time of change, perhaps, you know, entering into the menopause. But actually, if you're doing it consciously, and especially if you've been able to develop your awareness with your cycle up to this point, a real time for powerful transformation. And then let's go back to winter. Now you've had an overview, so we're back to this point of the wise woman, so you can kind of see how you're building up to that point through your life, and coming back to the bleed if you're still having a menstrual cycle, when really it would be good to rest, to withdraw. And again, I know that can be hard in our culture, but the 1% rule is really useful. But do what you can, and that will go a long way to acknowledging what you really need, and then perhaps you'll make bigger steps to making those changes. So let me pan out. I've got the whole cycle laid before us, and so cycle after cycle you're working through it, seeing the changes, and you might discover all sorts of things about yourself. So again, I hope this has helped, and do be in touch, or go online to the Red School. They've got amazing courses there that will tell you a lot more about all of this. Many blessings. So what do you think the red tent is, Sarah?
I think a red tent is calming down for annoying things and meeting other ladies and seeing new people and making new friends with all of the ladies.